House of Tubes. The House of Tubes, or La Casa de los Tubos, is an urban legend about a haunted house in Monterrey, Mexico. In Monterrey, Mexico, there's a very famous legend about an abandoned building called the House of Tubes. The strange structure was built in the 1970s, but it was never inhabited. The House of Tubes has very unique architecture. From the outside, it looks like a set of gray concrete tubes standing on end. On the inside, the hallways are cylindrical in shape. On one side of the building, a series of ramps lead to the upper floors. On the other side, the levels are connected by a large stairs. According to the legend, the house was built by a wealthy couple who had a daughter who was paralyzed. The father wanted to create a special house that was custom made for disabled people. It was designed with ramps leading from one floor to another to allow her to move freely around the house in her wheelchair. The man hoped it would give his daughter the feeling that she wasn't disabled at all. When construction began, the young girl seemed really excited about the new home her family would be living in. She asked her father to take her to see the building. On the day the girl went to see the house, two of the architects who designed it suffered a terrible accident and were killed by falling concrete. The construction crew refused to continue working on it. The family managed to hire another group of builders to finish the house, and the girl wanted to go back to check on them. She was testing out the ramps going up and down from one floor to the next. Her parents took their eyes off her for just a moment, and her wheelchair suddenly started to slide backwards down the ramp. She wasn't able to stop herself, and her wheelchair came hurtling down the ramp, going much too fast. The poor girl went flying out the open window and fell to her death. Her grieving parents couldn't bear the thought of living in the property that had caused their daughter's death, so all construction was immediately stopped, never to resume again. Years later, the half-finished building was put on the market, but not a lot of buyers were interested. One wealthy family went to see the House of Tubes and brought their young son with them. While they surveyed the lower levels, the boy went upstairs alone to explore. A few minutes later, they heard their son screaming. When they looked up, they saw him struggling with a little girl. As they watched in horror, the girl grabbed their son and tossed him out of the window. The boy landed on the ground below with a sickening thud. The young girl was nowhere to be found. After this terrible tragedy, the authorities fenced off the land and it was no longer available to the public. They say the house is cursed and it is haunted by the ghosts of the two children who died there. It is said that at night the horrible sound of a young girl weeping can be heard, and the ghostly apparition of a young boy has been spotted playing in the entrance. Some people claim to have seen a young girl standing at the open window on one of the upper floors and waving at passers-by. The Severed Hand. The Severed Hands is a scary true ghost story about a haunted alley in Mexico where people are afraid to go because it is said to be haunted by two pairs of skeletal hands. It's called El Callejón de las Manitas, or the Alley of the Hand. Back in 1780, a Franciscan priest came to the city of San Luis Potosí in Mexico. He found work as a Latin teacher in one of the best schools at the time and rented a house in one of the most desolate parts of the city called Alfalfa. To help him with his duties, he hired two teenage boys who lived in the area. One day he went on a journey to visit several villages in the surrounding area and brought the boys with him. He was collecting donations for the church. When they came home, the priest gave the boys orders to unsaddle the horses and put them into their stalls with hay and water. The two boys went about their work, and when they were finished, they were hungry, so they went home for dinner. Meanwhile, the priest was very tired, and after saying his prayers, he went to bed early. When it was night, the boys returned to the priest's house. When they went inside, they were horrified by what they found. The priest was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. He had been murdered. The boys fled in terror and ran through the streets, shouting for help. People gathered at the house, and someone had the presence of mind to alert the soldiers and doctors in a nearby military hospital. They confirmed that what the boys were saying was true. The priest had been brutally murdered. The city authorities immediately took on the task of investigating what happened to the poor man. They searched every corner of the city and surrounding towns looking for suspects. They arrested several people, but without any evidence against them, they were released. One official at the police station was suspicious of the two boys and had them arrested. He placed them in separate rooms at the military hospital and began a harsh interrogation. Under such intense pressure, the boys started blaming each other. The younger boy said that the older one had killed the priest to steal the money he had collected from the villages. The authorities took the boys back to the priest's house where they recovered the money and the murder weapon, a bloody dagger. The boys were put on trial and found guilty. The judge sentenced them to be executed. They were hung by the neck until they were dead, and then their hands were cut off. The severed hands of the two teenage boys were hung on the wall in the gloomy alley outside the priest's house as a warning to others. Ever since then, the sad and lonely alleyway has been known as the Alley of the Hands. People were afraid to pass through it. Whenever they had to go down this alley, they made the sign of the cross and said a prayer. They didn't stop praying until they came out on the other side. After a while, the severed hands were taken down and buried, but a few days later, they were back hanging on the wall. Whenever anyone tried to remove them, they would just keep reappearing on the wall. This went on for years until the district was renovated and the alley was demolished and turned into a wide street. However, they say that if you go to the place where the gloomy alley once stood, on some nights in November, you will see the skeletal hands floating above you. You also might catch a glimpse of the ghost of the priest disappearing around the corner. Monterrey House. Monterrey House is a scary urban legend about about a haunted house in Mexico and the horrible murders that occurred there. There's a haunted house in Monterrey, Mexico that locals call La Casa de Arambari, or the House of Arambari. It has been visited many times by paranormal investigators, and they say that the souls of two women who were brutally murdered there can never rest in peace. Today, House of Arambari is very dilapidated and neglected, but many years ago, it was the home of the richest families in Monterrey. In 1933, a man lived there with his wife, Florinda, and their daughter, Antonita. Little did the happy family know that the house would soon become the scene of a horrible and vicious crime which was caused by human greed. One morning, the father of the family went to work, leaving his wife and daughter alone in the house. Soon afterwards, 3 men broke in and attacked the 2 women. The burglars thought there was a large chest full of silver coins that was hidden in the house, and they demanded to know the location. These men tortured the wife and daughter in the dining room and eventually killed them. When the bodies were found, they say it was one of the most horrific, bloody, and cruel crimes ever seen in the area. The housewife and her daughter had been almost completely decapitated. Their heads were hanging on by a thread. The people of Monterrey were shaken and appalled by the brutal murder. The police were faced with a very difficult investigation because there was no sign that the front doors had been forced, and as there were no witnesses to the crime apart from the family pet. However, the family pet was a parrot, and it proved to be instrumental in capturing the murders. While the police were examining the house, the pet parrot began screeching in Spanish, "No me mates Gabriel, no me mate Gabriel," which means "Don't kill me, Gabriel, don't kill me, Gabriel." They realized that the parrot was repeating the last words of its owner. The police then questioned the father and found out that his nephew's name was Gabriel. They arrested the nephew, and under questioning, he confessed to killing the 2 women. He told police that he had planned the robbery along with 2 brothers who owned a nearby butcher's shop. The 3 murderers were arrested by the police, who gave them a special brand of justice that was sometimes applied in Mexico many years ago. They call it the law of flight, or the law of escape. The police drove the 3 criminals out into the desert, and then allowed them to escape and shot them in the back as they fled. Their bodies were transported back to Monterrey and put on display so that all the people in the area could see. Ever since that time, this Monterrey house has been plagued by many supernatural events. Many people reported seeing the ghosts of the 2 murdered women lurking in the dining room. Others said that at night they could often hear the terrible cries of the mother and daughter pleading with their murderers and screaming, "Don't kill me, Gabriel, don't kill me, Gabriel." The main bedroom of the house contains a portrait of the mother, and they say that her face changes and becomes completely disfigured. According to witnesses, a terrible tension can be felt in the house, and until you leave, you will be followed by the strong smell of sulfur. According to the legend, those who have heard the screams of the 2 unfortunate women who lost their lives in this place say that their souls will never rest in peace. The story of the House of Arambari has become famous throughout Mexico over the years, and recently, the case even got more attention when a couple of reporters visited the house. They were looking for evidence of a haunting, and when they left, the reporters were involved in a serious car accident. When recordings they had made were later reviewed, they could clearly hear distant cries and hollow moans on the tape. The house had to be closed to the public because teenagers would often break in and trespass, hoping to witness some supernatural event. The authorities erected a big wire fence across the front of the house, but the interior is still visible from the street. Locals say that if you walk past the house at night, you can hear the cries of the souls who are in pain, and sometimes, if you look in the windows, you can catch a glimpse of the shadowy figures of the ghostly tenants who may never leave. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. We would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.